The smell of pine sap mixed with something metallic hit Tommy's nostrils as he pushed through the undergrowth, his small hands gripping the straps of his canvas pack. The 8-year-old had wandered farther from his family's cabin than ever before, following a game trail that wound up the mountainside like a snake through tall grass. That's when he heard it, a low groan that didn't belong to any animal he knew. "Stay with me on this one." Tommy froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The forest had gone silent around him, even the chickadees stopping their chatter. He knew he should turn back, knew his pa would tan his hide for coming this far up the mountain alone. But something pulled him forward, maybe curiosity, maybe that stubborn streak his ma always complained about. The groaning came again, closer now. Tommy crept forward, placing each foot carefully to avoid snapping twigs. Through a break in the trees, he saw something that made his blood run cold. 4 men, mountain men by the looks of their buckskin clothes and wild beards, were chained to an enormous pine tree. Their wrists were raw where the metal had cut into flesh, and their faces were gaunt with hunger. One of them lifted his head, and Tommy gasped. Even through the dirt and dried blood, he recognized that face. It was Jake Brennan, the trapper who sometimes traded furs at his pa's general store down in the valley. Jake's eyes widened when he saw the boy. "Tommy," Jake's voice came out as a croak. "That you, boy?" Tommy wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to turn tail and get back to safety. But the desperation in Jake's eyes held him in place. He took a tentative step forward, then another. "Mr. Brennan." What happened to you?" Jake tried to speak, but one of the other men, a grizzled fellow with a scar running down his cheek, cut him off with a sharp look. "Boy shouldn't be here," the scarred man growled. "You need to get on home." Now, but Tommy couldn't leave. Not when he saw the state they were in. The chains looked heavy, industrial, not something you'd expect to find this deep in the wilderness. And the way they were positioned around that tree, it was clear someone had put thought into this. Someone who wanted these men to suffer. "I can get help," Tommy said, his voice small but determined. "My pa, he'll know what to do." "No," all 4 men spoke at once, their voices urgent. Jake struggled against his chains, wincing at the pain. "You can't tell anyone you saw us here. You understand me, boy?" Not a soul. Tommy's confusion must have shown on his face because another of the men, younger than the others, with red hair and freckles, spoke up. "There's things happening in these mountains, son. Things a boy your age shouldn't get mixed up in. But you'll die out here," Tommy protested. He could see how weak they were, how their lips were cracked from thirst. "When's the last time you had water?" The men exchanged glances. The fourth one, who hadn't spoken yet, was an older fellow with silver threading through his dark beard. He studied Tommy with shrewd eyes before speaking. "3 days," he said simply. "Maybe 4. Hard to keep track." Tommy slipped his pack off his shoulders and pulled out his water canteen. It wasn't much, but it was something. He approached Jake first, unscrewing the cap with trembling fingers. "Careful, boy," Jake warned. "Don't get too close to the chains." Tommy didn't understand the warning, but he kept his distance as he helped Jake drink. The man took small sips, closing his eyes in relief. Tommy moved to each man in turn, rationing out the water as best he could. When the canteen was empty, he stepped back. "I've got to do something," Tommy said. "You can't just stay here." The scarred man shook his head. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, kid. The men who did this, they ain't regular folks." "There," he trailed off, glancing at the others. "They're what?" Tommy pressed. "Dangerous," Jake finished. "More dangerous than you can imagine. And if they find out you've been here, if they know you've seen us." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Tommy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. He looked around the clearing, really seeing it for the first time. There were tracks everywhere, boot prints, but also something else. Drag marks, like heavy things had been pulled through the dirt. And near the base of the tree, half buried under pine needles, he saw something that made his stomach turn. Bones. Old ones, weathered white by the elements. "How many others?" Tommy asked quietly. The silver-bearded man answered. "Too many. We're just the latest." Won't be the last neither unless what? Unless someone stops them. The man's eyes bored into Tommy's. But that someone can't be you, boy. You're too young, too small. You just end up chained to this tree with us. Or worse, Tommy's mind raced. He thought about his pa, about Sheriff Patterson down in town. Surely they could help. But the fear in these men's eyes told him it wasn't that simple. Whoever had done this had power, had reach. Maybe they even had people in town who would report back to them. There's got to be something I can do, Tommy insisted. Jake sighed. You really want to help, boy? Then you forget you ever saw us. You go home, you live your life, and you never come back to this part of the mountain. Promise me, but Tommy couldn't promise that. He was only 8, but he'd been raised to help folks in need. His ma had drilled that into him since before he could walk. And these men needed help more than anyone he'd ever seen. I'll be careful, Tommy said. But I'm not just gonna leave you here to die. The red-haired man laughed bitterly. Stubborn little cuss, ain't he? Reminds me of myself at that age, the silver-bearded man said. Which is exactly why he needs to leave. Now, Tommy heard something then, a twig snapping somewhere in the forest. All 5 of them froze, listening. The sound came again, closer. Footsteps, trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. Hide, Jake hissed. Behind them, rocks. Quick, Tommy didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his pack and dove behind a cluster of boulders at the edge of the clearing. He pressed himself flat against the cold stone, trying to make himself as small as possible. Through a gap between the rocks, he watched as a figure emerged from the trees. It was a man, tall and lean, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to absorb the light. He moved with the easy grace of someone who knew these woods well. In his hand, he carried a rifle. Well, well, the man said, his voice smooth as honey but with something rotten underneath. How are my guests enjoying their accommodations? None of the chained men responded. They just stared at him with a mixture of hatred and resignation. The man walked closer, and Tommy got his first good look at his face. It was handsome in a sharp way, with high cheekbones and pale eyes that reminded Tommy of a wolf's. There was something wrong about those eyes, something that made Tommy's skin crawl. Silent treatment again. That's no way to treat your host. The man set down a canvas bag he'd been carrying. I brought supplies. Water, a little food. Can't have you dying on me too quickly. Where's the fun in that? He pulled out a water bottle and approached the scarred man first. Open up, Hank. Don't make this difficult. The scarred man, Hank, kept his mouth firmly shut. The pale-eyed man sighed dramatically. Always so stubborn. You mountain men, you think you're so tough. But everyone breaks eventually. He moved on to Jake. What about you, Brennan? Feeling thirsty, Jake spat at his feet. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. A tension that made Tommy hold his breath. I'm trying to be civilized about this, the man said quietly. But if you prefer, we can go back to the old ways. The ways my grandfather used when he cleared out the Cherokee from these mountains. Would you like that? Your grandfather was a butcher, the silver-bearded man growled. And you're worse, the pale-eyed man smiled. It was the coldest expression Tommy had ever seen. Flattery will get you nowhere, Moses. Though I do appreciate the comparison. Grandfather was quite effective in his methods. He set the water bottle down and picked up his rifle again. You know what your problem is. All of you. You think these mountains belong to you. You think because you can trap a beaver or track a deer, that gives you some claim to this land. He shook his head. But you're wrong. These mountains belong to those with the vision to use them properly. And that's not you. You mean those with the money to steal them, Hank spat. Steal? Such an ugly word. I prefer acquire. My associates and I are acquiring this land for development. Progress, gentlemen. The future. And you're standing in the way of it. Tommy's mind raced as he listened. Land development. He'd heard his pa talking about men from the city wanting to build fancy lodges and ski resorts in the mountains. But his pa had said the mountain men own most of the good land, had claims going back generations. "We ain't selling," Jake said firmly. "None of us are. You can keep us here till we rot, but it won't change nothing. Our kin know not to sell to you," the pale-eyed man laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Your kin? You mean like old Tom Brennan?" "Your brother," Jake's face went white. "Oh yes, I paid him a visit last week." Funny how agreeable people become when you explain the situation properly. He signed over his claim quick enough. Even threw in that nice piece by the river. "You're lying," Jake said, but Tommy could hear the fear in his voice. "Am I? Check the county records when you get back." "Oh wait," the man smiled again. "You're not going back, are you?" He walked to the silver-bearded man, Moses. "Your nephew was equally cooperative. Smart boy. Knows when he's beat. Unlike you old fools, the younger generation understands progress. What did you do to them?" Moses demanded. "Nothing permanent. Yet. That depends entirely on you gentlemen. You see, I need more than just your land. I need your cooperation. Your endorsement even. The other mountain families, they look up to you for. If you were to encourage them to sell, to embrace the future," he spread his hands, "well then everyone wins. You get to live, they get fair prices for their land, and progress marches on." "Go to hell," Hank said flatly. The man's pale eyes narrowed. "I was afraid you'd say that." He reached into his bag again and pulled out something that made Tommy's blood freeze. A photograph. Even from his hiding spot, Tommy could see it was a picture of children. School children, from the looks of it. "Recognize anyone?" the man asked, holding it up. "That's the Valley School, isn't it? Where all your precious little ones go to learn their letters." He traced a finger over the photo. "So many young lives, so full of potential. Be a shame if something happened to disrupt their education." "You wouldn't," the red-haired man spoke for the first time in a while. "Even you ain't that low, wouldn't I?" The man tucked the photo back in his bag. "I've found that people's principles become remarkably flexible when their loved ones are at stake. It's human nature, really." Tommy felt sick. This man, whoever he was threatening kids. Kids like him, like his friends from school. His hand went to his pocket, where he kept his jackknife. It was small, meant for whittling, but it was sharp. "I'll give you another day to think it over," the man was saying. "Consider your options carefully. Oh, and don't worry about dying of thirst. I'll make sure you have just enough water to keep you alive. Can't have you escaping through death, can we?" He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. I know you've been hoping someone will stumble across you. Some hunter or hiker who might raise the alarm. Let me dissuade you of that notion." He pulled out another photograph. This one showed a man in hunting gear, lying very still in a shallow grave. "That's Bill Henderson," Moses breathed. "He went missing 2 weeks ago. Found your little camp here," the man explained conversationally. "Started asking questions in town. Had to be dealt with. My associates are very thorough when it comes to cleaning up loose ends." He put the photo away and shouldered his rifle. "Think about my offer, gentlemen. Your stubbornness is admirable, but ultimately pointless. Everyone has a breaking point. I'm curious to find out what yours is." With that, he melted back into the forest, moving with that same eerie grace. Tommy stayed frozen behind the rocks, counting slowly to 100 before he dared to breathe normally again. "He's gone," Jake called softly. "You can come out now, boy." Tommy emerged from his hiding spot on shaking legs. The 4 men looked even more defeated than before, if that was possible. "Now you see," Hank said grimly. "Now you understand why you can't tell nobody. That man, his name is Silas Whitmore. He's got people everywhere. In town, in the sheriff's office, probably even in the state capitol. You breathe a word of this to anyone, and you'll end up like Bill Henderson. Or worse, your family will." Tommy's mind was spinning. He thought of his ma and pa, his little sister Emma. The thought of Silas Whitmore coming after them made him want to throw up. "But there's got to be someone," Tommy insisted. "Someone who ain't bought and paid for." Moses shook his head. "Even if there was, what would you tell them?" that 4 mountain men are chained to a tree in the wilderness. By the time they got up here, if they even believed you, we'd be gone. Moved somewhere else, or buried like Bill. Whitmore's too smart to leave evidence lying around. Then what do I do? Tommy's voice cracked. He was 8 years old, and he'd stumbled into something way over his head. You survive, Jake said simply. You go home, you act normal, and you forget this ever happened. That's the only way to keep yourself and your family safe. But even as Jake said it, Tommy could see the resignation in his eyes. These men had maybe days left, if that. Once they broke, or died, Whitmore would move on to the next group of holdouts. And the next, until he'd cleared out every mountain family that stood in the way of his development plans. Wait, the red-haired man said suddenly. Boy, what's your last name? Hartley, Tommy replied. Tommy Hartley. The 4 men exchanged glances. Jim Hartley's boy, Moses asked. Tommy nodded. Yes, sir. Your pa still got that old ham radio in his store. Yeah, he talks to folks all over on it. Even as far as Canada sometimes. Moses leaned forward as much as his chains would allow. Listen careful, boy. I'm gonna tell you something, and you need to remember every word. Can you do that? Tommy nodded again, sensing this was important. There's a frequency, Moses said slowly. 146.52. Your pa will know how to tune it. Every night at midnight, there's a net, a group of folks who check in with each other. Mountain folk, mostly. Good people who look out for their own. Moses, no, Jake warned. You'll get the boy killed. Boy's gonna get killed anyway if Whitmore decides he's a loose end, Moses shot back. At least this way there's a chance. He looked back at Tommy. You tell your pa to get on that frequency. Tell him to say the eagles don't fly in the rain, that exact phrase you hear. Someone will answer. Someone who can help. The eagles don't fly in the rain, Tommy repeated. Good. And tell them Moses sent you. Tell them about Whitmore, about what's happening up here. They'll know what to do. This is madness, Hank muttered. You're sending a child to do a man's work. I'm sending a child to do what we can't, Moses corrected. Sometimes the smallest key opens the biggest door. Tommy heard a sound in the distance, voices maybe, carried on the wind. His time was running out. I need to know more, he said urgently. Where does Whitmore stay? Who are his associates? How many? No, Jake cut him off. You know too much already. Get on home, boy. Now, before they come back, but Tommy had one more question. The chains, is there any way to break them? Not without tools we don't have, Hank said. Believe me, we've tried. These ain't normal chains. They're mining chains, meant to haul a ton of rock. You'd need bolt cutters at least, maybe more. Tommy's pa had bolt cutters in his tool shed. Big ones for cutting fence wire. But even if he could carry them up here, it would take him hours to make the trip again. And that was assuming he didn't get caught. Go, Moses said urgently. Remember what I told you, 146.52. The eagles don't fly in the rain. That's your part to play. Tommy took one last look at the 4 men. They looked back at him with a mixture of hope and resignation. Then he turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no thought for stealth now. He had to get home. Had to talk to his pa. The journey down the mountain seemed to take forever. Tommy's legs burned and his lungs ached, but he didn't slow down. Every shadow could be Whitmore or one of his men. Every sound could be pursuit. By the time he saw the familiar smoke rising from his family's chimney, the sun was starting to dip toward the western peaks. He burst through the front door, startling his ma, who was stirring something on the stove. Tommy, where have you been? Your pa's been out looking for you for hours. I need to talk to Pa, Tommy gasped. It's important. Well, you can explain to him why you worried us sick when he gets back. Now get washed up for supper. Ma, please. The desperation in his voice must have gotten through because she stopped stirring and really looked at him. What's wrong, honey? Did something happen? Before Tommy could answer, he heard his pa's truck pulling up outside. Jim Hartley came through the door a moment later, his face a storm cloud of worry and anger. Thomas James Hartley, you better have a good explanation for. Pa, I need to talk to you, Tommy interrupted. Alone. Please? Jim's anger faded, replaced by concern. He looked at his wife, who shrugged. Come on then, Jim said. Let's go to the workshop. The workshop was Jim's sanctuary, filled with tools and the smell of sawdust and motor oil. More importantly, it was where he kept his ham radio set up. Tommy's eyes went to it immediately. All right, son, Jim said, closing the door behind them. What's this about? Tommy took a deep breath and told him everything. About finding the men, about Whitmore, about the threats in the photograph of Bill Henderson's grave. His pa's face grew more serious with every word. When Tommy got to the part about the frequency and the code phrase, Jim's expression changed entirely. Moses told you this? He asked sharply. Yes, sir. Moses and Jake Brennan and 2 others. They're all chained up there, Pa. They're gonna die if we don't help them. Jim went to his radio and started powering it up. I know that frequency, he said quietly. Haven't used it in years, but I know it. He glanced at Tommy. Your grandpa was part of that net. Back during the coal mine strikes, when the companies brought in gun thugs to break up the unions. The mountain folk had to look out for each other then. Seems we need to again. He tuned the radio carefully. It was only 7 o'clock, hours before the midnight net. But Jim picked up the microphone anyway. This is Jim Hartley, he said clearly. Breaking in with emergency traffic. The eagles don't fly in the rain. I repeat, the eagles don't fly in the rain. Static filled the workshop. Then, after what felt like forever, a voice crackled through. This is Blue Mountain Base. We copy your emergency. Switch to secondary channel. Jim's fingers flew over the dials. When he keyed the mic again, his voice was steady. Blue Mountain, this is Jim. Moses sent my boy with a message. 4 of our people are in trouble. Big trouble, understood. Are you secure? Jim glanced at the locked door. As secure as I can be. Stand by for Shepard. There was another pause, then a new voice came on. Older, gravelly, with an authority that rang through even over the static. Jim, this is Shepard. I knew your daddy. Good man. Now tell me what's happening. Jim handed the microphone to Tommy. Tell him, son. Just like you told me. So Tommy told the story again. This time, he noticed his pa making notes, marking things on a map spread across his workbench. When he finished, there was silence on the other end. Finally, Shepard spoke. We've been tracking Whitmore's operation for months. Lost 3 good men, already trying to get evidence. This is the first confirmed location we've had. A pause. Boy, you sure you can find that spot again? Yes, sir, Tommy said firmly. Jim, how well do you know the old logging roads up that way? Like the back of my hand, Jim replied. Hunted those ridges since I was Tommy's age. Good. We're mobilizing. Every available hand. But it'll take time to coordinate. Can those men last another day? Tommy thought about how weak they'd looked, how Whitmore was deliberately keeping them on the edge. I don't know, sir. Maybe, then we move tonight. Jim, I need you to. The workshop door exploded inward. Tommy's ma screamed from somewhere in the house. 3 men rushed in, all carrying guns. And behind them, moving with that same predatory grace, came Silas Whitmore. Well, well, Whitmore said, his pale eyes taking in the scene. What an interesting conversation. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to sign off now. One of his men smashed the radio with the butt of his rifle. Components scattered across the floor, sparking and smoking. Pa, Tommy started forward, but Jim caught him, pulled him back. Smart man, Whitmore said. I'd hate for young Tommy here to have an accident. He smiled that cold smile. Though it seems accidents run in the family. You really should be more careful about what frequencies you use, Mr. Hartley. My associates monitor all kinds of interesting channels. Let my family go, Jim said, his voice steady despite the guns pointed at him. This is between us. Oh, I don't think so. You see, your son has created quite a problem for me. He knows things he shouldn't. Seen things he shouldn't. And now you've compounded the issue by contacting Well, let's call them troublemakers. Whitmore pulled out a pistol, examining it casually. The question is what to do about it. The people I contacted know everything, Jim said. Killing us won't stop them, perhaps not. But it will slow them down. And time is all I need. By tomorrow night, Mr. Brennan and his friends will have signed over their deeds. One way or another. After that, everything's legal and above board. Just business, Tommy's mind raced. They needed time. Time for Shepard and whoever he was bringing to get here. But how? Then he remembered something. The bolt cutters in the tool shed. The ones his pa used for fence work. They were hanging right there on the wall, not 10 feet away. You're making a mistake, Jim was saying. The mountain folk won't stand for this. You kill us and they'll come for you, Whitmore laughed. The mountain folk. You mean those backward hillbillies scattered across these ridges? They can barely organize a barn raising, let alone mount any kind of resistance. He gestured to one of his men. Tie them up. We'll take them with us. Insurance, you might say. As the men moved forward with rope, Tommy acted. He was small, quick, and they weren't expecting it. He ducked under reaching hands and grabbed the bolt cutters from the wall. They were heavier than he expected, but adrenaline gave him strength. Tommy, no, his pa shouted. But Tommy was already moving, using his size to his advantage. He slipped between the men, out the door, running as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, he heard shouting, cursing. Whitmore's voice rising above it all. Get that boy! Tommy ran into the gathering dusk, the bolt cutters clutched to his chest. He knew these woods, knew every trail and hiding spot. But Whitmore's men would know he'd head for the mountain, try to free those men. They'd be watching the obvious routes. So Tommy didn't take the obvious routes. He circled back, using the creek bed to hide his tracks. He could hear them crashing through the brush, searching. But they were city men, for all their guns. They didn't know how to move silent in the forest. The bolt cutters were slowing him down, but he couldn't abandon them. They were the only hope those men had. He thought of his pa, his ma, what Whitmore might do to them. The thought nearly paralyzed him, but he forced himself to keep moving. Moses had been right. Sometimes the smallest key opens the biggest door. And right now, Tommy was the only key they had. It took him 3 hours to reach the clearing where the men were chained. 3 hours of hiding, doubling back, using every trick his pa had taught him about moving through the woods. By the time he got there, full dark had fallen. Only a sliver of moon provided light. Who's there? Jake's voice tense and afraid. It's me, Tommy. Boy, what are you doing here? I told you, Whitmore came to our house, Tommy said, already working at the first chain with the bolt cutters. He's got my ma and pa. But I contacted your friends first. Help's coming, Shepard, Moses asked, hope creeping into his voice. Yeah. He said he's bringing everyone. The chains were thick and Tommy's arms were already tired. But he kept working, putting all his weight into it. Finally, with a snap that seemed to echo through the forest, the first link broke. That's it, boy, Hank encouraged. You're doing fine. It took 20 minutes to free all 4 men. 20 minutes of backbreaking work, of jumping at every forest sound. When the last chain fell away, the men stood slowly, rubbing their raw wrists. We need to move, Moses said. Whitmore will have men watching the trails down. What about Tommy's folks? Jake asked. We'll get them, Moses said firmly. But first, we need to link up with Shepard's people. Tommy, that was brave what you did. Stupid but brave. I couldn't just leave you, Tommy said. The red-haired man clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, kid. Your pa would be proud. They moved through the darkness, 4 weak men and 1 exhausted boy. But they moved with purpose now, with hope. Moses led them not down the mountain, but along its flank following game trails Tommy had never seen before. Where are we going? Tommy asked. Old Rendezvous Point, Moses explained. From the strike days. If Shepard's smart, and he is, that's where he'll set up. They'd been walking for an hour when they heard it. Gunshots echoing across the ridges. Not hunting shots, too many too fast. A firefight. That's coming from the valley, Jake said. My house is that direction, Tommy said, fear clutching at his heart. Moses grabbed his shoulder. We stick to the plan. Getting yourself killed won't help your folks. But Tommy was already running, crashing through the brush toward the sound of guns. The men cursed and followed, their longer legs eating up the distance. They crested a ridge and saw it spread below them. The Hartley place was lit up like a torch. The workshop was on fire. Muzzle flashes sparked in the darkness as two groups exchanged fire. Tommy could see men behind cover, shooting at the house. But return fire was coming from inside. Shepard's people, Moses breathed. They made it. Even as he spoke, more vehicles came roaring up the valley road. Not just trucks, horses too, riders who knew how to move fast in the dark. The mountain folk were coming, answering the call. Whitmore's men suddenly found themselves outnumbered and outflanked. Some tried to flee, only to run into more mountain men who'd circled around. The gunfire intensified, then gradually died away. Come on, Moses said. It's safe now. They made their way down to the house. Tommy burst through the door to find his ma and pa tied, but unharmed, being freed by a man in worn camouflage. Tommy, his ma pulled him into a crushing hug. Oh, thank God. You did it, son, his pa said, pride evident despite the circumstances. You got word out.